They say rock bottom is the solid foundation on which you rebuild your life. But when Sarah Mitchell walked out of that courtroom on Tuesday morning, she didn't feel a foundation. She felt the earth opening up
Here it
to
is.
swallow her
It's
whole.
official.
Thank you.
Her
I'll
husband
go
of
now.
10 years,
Take care.
the man she'd worked double shifts to support while he built his empire, didn't just divorce her. He erased her. No alimony, no home, just a suitcase and a broken heart. She thought her life was over. She had no idea that a single wrong turn in the rain and a door opening at the wrong address was about to change the entire global economy and her destiny forever. This isn't just a breakup story. This is the story of how a rejected wife became the queen of the boardroom. The ink on the divorce settlement was barely dry when Marcus Kane checked his Rolex Submariner, the one Sarah had bought him for his 30th birthday, using 3 years of savings. He didn't look at her. He looked at the time. His voice came out flat, stripped of the warmth that used to greet her after long days. "Are we done here?" He sat across the mahogany table at the law offices of Sullivan, Pierce and Moore in downtown Manhattan. The view outside was gray, matching the hollow feeling in Sarah's chest. Rain streaked the windows like tears she refused to shed in front of these men. The lawyer James Sullivan snapped the thick file shut with a sound that felt like a coffin closing. "We're done, Mr. Kane. The prenuptial agreement you signed 10 years ago, combined with the recent restructuring of your assets into Delaware holding companies, leaves Mrs. Kane with, well, as discussed, the settlement is final." Sarah stared at her hands. They were rougher than they used to be, skin dry from detergent and hard water. 10 years ago, she was a promising graphic designer with offers from 3 Manhattan firms. Then Marcus had an idea for a tech logistics startup, Streamline Logistics. It needed capital. It needed time. It needed a wife who would scrub floors and wait tables at Gus's diner on 4th Avenue just to pay the server bills while he pitched investors in coffee shops. She had done it all, every bit of it. She'd written the original business plan on napkins during her breaks at the diner, sketching out distribution networks, while Marcus networked at cocktail parties he said were essential for the company. In 2018, she designed the hub-and-spoke logistics model that became the backbone of Streamline, the innovation that caught Vortex Corporation's attention. She'd drawn those distribution network diagrams at 3 in the morning while Marcus slept, her hands cramping around cheap ballpoint pens because they couldn't afford design software yet. The tremor in her voice betrayed her as she forced the words out. "Marcus, I don't care about the shares, but the house. My mother's piano is in there. You know that's the only thing I have left of her." Marcus finally looked at her. His eyes, once a comforting blue that reminded her of summer skies over Lake Michigan, were now cold steel. He stood up, buttoning his $5,000 Italian suit with practiced efficiency. The words came out as flat as a business memo. "The house is being liquidated to cover the initial IPO costs for the merger with Vortex Corp., and Jessica wants to redecorate the penthouse anyway. The piano was donated to Goodwill yesterday. It was clutter." The name hit her like a physical blow. Jessica. Marcus's 24-year-old chief of staff, the woman Sarah had welcomed into their home for Christmas dinner last year, thinking she was a lonely employee who had nowhere to go for the holidays. Sarah had made her favorite dish, herb-roasted chicken her mother used to make, while Jessica sat at their table and laughed at Marcus's jokes, her hand lingering on his arm just a second too long. Sarah's throat closed around the words as she stood up, gripping the edge of the table. "You donated it, Marcus, you knew. You knew that piano was—" He cut her off with the efficiency of a man checking items off a to-do list. "It's done, Sarah. Look, I'm not a monster. I put $5,000 in your personal account. That's enough for a deposit on an apartment in Queens and a few months to find a job. You're resourceful. You survived before me. You'll survive after me." He turned to the lawyer, already dismissing her from his attention like she was a conference call he needed to hang up on. "James, send the finalized papers to the board. I have a celebration dinner at the River Club at 7. Marcus walked out. He didn't look back, didn't pause, didn't show even a flicker of the man who once promised to love her through sickness and health, for richer or poorer. He walked out of the marriage the same way he walked out of boring meetings, efficiently, ruthlessly, and without a second thought for the people he left bleeding behind him. Sarah stood there, the silence of the conference room deafening, except for the rain hammering against the windows. The city beyond the glass kept moving, indifferent to the fact that her entire world had just collapsed into rubble. The lawyer's voice dripped with barely concealed contempt as he slid a check across the polished wood. "Mrs. Kane, or Ms. Mitchell, I suppose, I suggest you cash this quickly. It's a courtesy. Legally, he owed you nothing." The tears finally came hot and shameful against her cheeks. Why I built that company with him. I wrote the original business plan on napkins while serving coffee to people who looked through me like I was furniture. Sullivan's polite sneer could have cut glass. On napkins, not on contracts. In the world of business, Miss Mitchell, if it isn't signed, it didn't happen. You were a placeholder, a startup cost, and now the company has gone public. Mr. Kane has moved on to the next phase of his life. I suggest you do the same. Sarah grabbed her purse fingers, numb and clumsy. She left the check on the table. It was foolish pride, perhaps, but she couldn't touch money that felt like hush money for a decade of her life, compensation for being stupid enough to believe in love and partnership while Marcus was building his empire on her back. She walked out of the skyscraper and onto Fifth Avenue. The rain had intensified into a cold, biting November downpour that soaked through her carefully chosen court date blouse within seconds. She had nowhere to go. The apartment they'd shared, she'd decorated, she'd made home, was already locked against her. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She almost didn't look, but habit won over dignity. Marcus's text glowed on the screen like a final insult. "Security codes to the house have been changed. Your suitcases are with the doorman. Please collect them by 5 p.m. or they go to the curb." Sarah looked up at the sky, letting the rain mix with her tears so no one passing by could tell the difference. She felt small, invisible, exactly the way she'd felt for the last 5 years of her marriage. She was 32 years old, with a gap in her resume the size of a marriage, a heart shattered into a million pieces, and $5,000 she refused to touch, sitting in an account she'd probably need to drain by next month just to survive. She hailed a cab, her hand shaking so badly she nearly missed the first one that slowed down. The driver's voice was impatient, already annoyed by the wet passenger dripping on his seats. "Where to, lady?" She didn't know. She gave him the only address she could think of, her old college roommate Brenda, who lived in a cramped walk-up in Brooklyn. Brenda, who'd stayed friends even when Sarah disappeared into Marcus's world of startup dinners and investor meetings where wives were expected to smile and look pretty and not mention they'd designed the entire logistics network. Her voice came out barely above a whisper, 947 Willow Street, Brooklyn. As the cab merged into traffic, Sarah didn't see the black SUV that pulled out 3 cars behind them. She certainly didn't know that Marcus's cruelty had just set off a chain reaction that would wake a sleeping giant. The rain had turned torrential by the time the cab dropped Sarah off, the driver speeding away before she could even check her bearings, leaving her standing on the sidewalk with 2 suitcases and no umbrella. She wiped the water from her eyes and looked at the building. This didn't look like Brenda's place. Brenda lived in a loud, vibrant neighborhood in Brooklyn with corner bodegas and kids playing stickball even in the rain. This was the Upper East Side, a street lined with townhouses that whispered old money so quietly you could hear it in the silence. Heavy iron gates, limestone facades that had probably stood since before the Civil War, and an absence of noise that felt oppressive after the chaos of the last few hours. Sarah checked her phone. Dead battery. She must have mumbled the address wrong in her daze, or the driver misheard Willow for Willoughby or Williamsburg or some other street that sounded similar through her tears and his thick accent. She shivered. She was soaked to the bone, her silk blouse, the one she'd bought at a consignment shop specifically for court because Marcus's lawyer had warned her to look put together, was clinging to her skin like a second layer of shame. She looked at the house number in front of her, 1428. It was a massive structure, dark and imposing, with ivy crawling up the stone walls like veins carrying old secrets. There were no lights on. It looked abandoned, or perhaps just asleep, waiting for someone to wake it. Her teeth chattered as she muttered to herself, trying to force her exhausted brain to make a decision. "Okay, Sarah, just ask to use a phone. Just get a charger. You can't stand on the street with 2 suitcases in a storm like some pathetic Dickens character. She dragged the luggage up the stone steps, each one feeling like climbing a mountain. The suitcases felt like they weighed a ton, filled with the debris of her life clothes she'd bought on clearance, a few books Marcus had deemed too lowbrow for his new circles, and the framed photo of her and Marcus from their honeymoon in Napa Valley, which she hadn't had the heart to throw away yet, even though looking at it now made her want to vomit. She reached for the heavy brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. She let it fall 3 times. Thud, thud, thud. The sound echoed in the storm like a heartbeat. Silence. She waited, watching the rain create rivers in the gaps between cobblestones, washing everything clean except her. Her voice cracked as she whispered to the door to the universe, to anyone who might be listening, "Please, just someone be home." She knocked again, harder this time, desperation overriding propriety. If no one answered, she'd have to drag her bags to a subway station, and the nearest one was avenues away, and she didn't even know if she had enough cash for a Metro card, because Marcus had controlled their joint account, and she'd always just used his card. Suddenly the heavy oak door groaned. It didn't open fully, just cracked a few inches. A chain was still engaged. A pair of eyes peered out from the darkness, intense and dark, set in a face hidden by shadows. The voice that emerged was deep and gravelly, like stones grinding together. "We don't buy Girl Scout cookies, and we don't want any solar panels." Sarah's voice broke completely as the words tumbled out. "Please, I don't want to sell anything. I'm lost. My phone died. I just need to call a cab. Please, I'm soaked." The eyes narrowed, scanning her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and seen for the first time in years. They took in the expensive but soaked blouse, the designer suitcases that were knockoffs she'd bought from a street vendor, the utter devastation in her posture that no amount of rain could hide. This wasn't a beggar. This was a woman falling apart in real time. The door closed. Sarah's heart sank like a stone. He was locking her out, leaving her to drown in the rain and her own failure. Then the sound of the chain sliding back echoed through the storm like a miracle. The door swung open wide. Standing there was a man who looked like he hadn't seen the sun in months, maybe years. He was tall, well over 6 feet, wearing a black turtleneck and gray sweatpants that somehow looked more expensive than Marcus's $5,000 suit. He had a beard that was neatly trimmed, but thick dark hair swept back carelessly, and the kind of bone structure that belonged in marble sculptures. But it was his face that struck her breathless. It was handsome, undeniably, but it carried weight, a sadness that mirrored her own so precisely it was like looking into a funhouse mirror that reflected pain instead of distorting it. And then something strange happened. He looked at her, really looked at her, not through her the way Marcus had started doing 3 years ago, not past her the way the lawyer had. He looked at her like she was a person, a whole complete human being worthy of attention. His lips curled upward into something that wasn't a leer or a polite grimace, but a genuine warm smile, the kind you give someone you've been waiting for. His voice softened, losing the gravel. "Well, you better come in before you catch pneumonia. I'm Julian." Sarah hesitated, every warning her mother had ever given her about stranger danger ringing in her ears. But Marcus had taught her that the people you trust are the ones who hurt you the most. Maybe a stranger was safer. Maybe the universe had put her on this doorstep for a reason, or maybe she was just desperate and hypothermic and not thinking straight. She stepped across the threshold, dragging her wet suitcase across marble floors that probably cost more than every apartment she'd ever lived in combined. Her apology came out automatic, trained into her by a decade of making herself small. "I'm Sarah. I'm so sorry about your floor." Julian closed the massive door, shutting out the storm with a finality that felt like stepping into another world. Floors dry. Spirits are harder to fix. He walked past her toward a grand staircase that curved up into darkness, his barefoot steps silent on the marble. "I was just making tea. English breakfast. I assume you take it with lemon. Sugar is for people who haven't had a hard enough day yet." Sarah blinked, stunned into speechlessness for a moment. "How did you—" "Yes. Lemon. No sugar." Julian paused on the first step and turned back. The light from a crystal chandelier hit his face, illuminating features she suddenly recognized not from tabloids or society pages where Marcus desperately tried to get featured, but from a dusty business textbook she'd read in a Columbia Extension course 7 years ago. Sarah's gasp echoed in the foyer. You're Julian Blackwell." Julian Blackwell, the boy king of Wall Street. The prodigy who'd made his first billion by 22 revolutionized biotech shipping logistics with an algorithm so advanced it was still being studied in business schools, and then 5 years ago famously vanished. He'd liquidated his public assets, retreated from the boardrooms, and disappeared from public life so completely that conspiracy theories had sprouted like weeds. Rumors said he'd gone mad. Others said he was heartbroken. Most just said he was a myth, a cautionary tale about what happens when you burn too bright too young. And here he was in sweatpants offering her tea. Julian's smile faded slightly, replaced by something more guarded but not hostile. "I am. And you, Sarah Mitchell, are currently shivering on my rug. And unless I'm mistaken, those are the suitcases of a woman who just signed a very unfair contract." Sarah's body went rigid with shock. "How do you know my last name?" "I only said Sarah." Julian tapped the side of his head with one finger, a gesture that was almost playful. "I remember everything, Sarah. I remember the article in the Wall Street Journal 7 years ago. The couple behind Streamline Logistics, how love and innovation built the future of shipping. You were in the background of the photo holding the schematics. Marcus was in the front, holding the champagne. I always wondered when the guy holding the champagne would realize the schematics were worth more." He leaned against the banister, studying her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. "I've been waiting for a new chess partner. Marcus Kane just made the biggest mistake of his life, and tonight I think I'm going to help you make him pay for it." Sarah sat in a library that was larger than the entire apartment she'd shared with Marcus for 10 years. The walls were lined with books from floor to ceiling, leather spines in multiple languages, creating a mosaic of knowledge that made her feel simultaneously small and oddly safe. A fire crackled in a massive limestone hearth, throwing dancing shadows across Persian rugs and mahogany furniture that looked like it had witnessed a century of secrets. She held the porcelain teacup with both hands to stop them from shaking, the heat seeping into her frozen fingers. Julian sat opposite her in a leather wingback chair, legs crossed completely at ease in a way that suggested he'd spent years in this exact spot thinking through problems that would break lesser minds. He'd changed into a crisp white button-down shirt, though he remained barefoot, and somehow that combination, formal and casual, controlled and relaxed, made him look more dangerous than any suit could. Julian broke the silence with a question that felt like opening a door Sarah hadn't known existed. "Vortex Corp. That's who Marcus is merging with, correct?" Sarah nodded, her voice steadier than she felt. "Yes, the merger is supposed to be announced next week at the Global Tech Summit in Chicago. It's why he divorced me now. Vortex wanted a clean slate for the CEO. No baggage, no wife from the working class who might embarrass him at cocktail parties." Julian's laugh was dry, humorless, the sound of someone who'd heard this song before and hated the melody "clean slate." That's what Victor Ashford calls it when he buries bodies. Corporate bodies, personal bodies, the man doesn't discriminate. He stood up and walked to a chaotic desk covered in blueprints, monitors displaying stock tickers and news feeds, and what looked like architectural drawings of shipping routes. "Sarah, do you know why I disappeared 5 years ago?" She searched her memory for the sanitized version the media had fed them. "Burnout. That's what the news said. That you'd achieved everything by 30 and didn't know what to do next." Julian's correction was sharp, but not unkind. "The news says what people pay it to say. I didn't burn out. I was pushed out by Victor Ashford, the CEO of Vortex. They stole my proprietary algorithm for autonomous shipping logistics. They stole my life's work. The code I'd spent 6 years developing, rebranded it as their own innovation, and then sued ME for copyright infringement when I tried to fight back." He turned to face her, and the pain in his eyes was raw, unfiltered, the kind of wound that never quite heals. "I had the money to fight. I had the lawyers, the resources, everything, but I didn't have the will. My wife, Elena, she passed away in a car accident during the trial. Single-car collision on the Pacific Coast Highway at 3 in the morning. The police said she fell asleep at the wheel, but she'd been working 20-hour days helping me prepare depositions, and I let her. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The court ruling gave Vortex legal ownership of my code, the patent, the intellectual property, everything. Said I'd developed it using resources from a previous company Ashford had acquired, so technically it belonged to them. It was legal theft, wrapped in paperwork and delivered with a smile. I folded. I came here, and I hid. Sarah felt tears. She thought she'd run out of forming again. So you hate Vortex? Julian's response was quiet, but carried the weight of 5 years of calculated fury. And I hate Marcus Kane, who is about to hand over his company to Vortex like a gift-wrapped present because your husband is either too stupid or too arrogant to see he's being played. He walked back to her, every movement deliberate. Marcus isn't just handing it over. He's the Trojan horse. Vortex needs streamlined logistics because your husband's company has the one thing Vortex lacks: the last-mile distribution network that makes same-day delivery actually profitable. A network you designed. Sarah sat up straighter, recognition dawning. The hub-and-spoke model. I drew that up in 2018, spent 6 months modeling traffic patterns and warehouse locations. Julian pointed at her like a professor confirming a brilliant student's answer. Exactly. Marcus Kane is a suit. He's a handshake merchant who smiles pretty for investors and takes credit for other people's work. He doesn't understand the logistics. He just sells them. You understand them. You know why each hub is positioned exactly where it is. You know the algorithm that routes packages. You know the weak points in the system because you designed the whole thing. His voice took on an edge of controlled rage. If Marcus merges with Vortex, they become a monopoly that controls 60% of global shipping. They'll be able to dictate terms to every retailer, every manufacturer, every small business trying to compete. They will be untouchable. And Victor Ashford will have everything he stole from me plus everything you built, and neither of us will get so much as a footnote in the history books. Julian walked over and knelt in front of her chair, bringing his face level with hers, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes. I've been waiting for a flaw in their armor. I thought it would be a glitch in their code, a mistake in their financials, some kind of technical vulnerability I could exploit. I never expected the flaw to be Marcus's ego. He threw away the architect of his empire. He threw away you. Sarah felt something stir in her chest, something that had been dormant for so long she'd forgotten it existed, not hope exactly, but possibility. For 10 years, Marcus had told her she was lucky to be with him, that she should be grateful he'd taken a chance on a waitress with design school dreams. Julian looked at her like she was the most valuable asset in the room and maybe the world. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. What do you want to do? Julian's answer was calm, measured, and absolutely terrifying in its clarity. I want to burn it down. I want to stop that merger. I want to bankrupt Vortex and leave Marcus Kane with nothing but his cheap suits and his regrets and that vapid 24-year-old who'll leave him the second his credit cards stop working. But I can't go out there. The world thinks I'm crazy, thinks I'm a recluse who lost his mind when his wife died. They won't listen to me. The SEC would laugh me out of the building. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick black folder, setting it on her lap with the weight of a bomb. But they will listen to Phoenix Capital's new CEO. Sarah looked around the empty room, confused. Who is that? Julian's smile was small, but genuine. You. Sarah gasped, nearly dropping her tea-hot liquid sloshing over the rim onto her still-damp clothes. Me, Julian. I'm a graphic designer. I'm a rejected wife with a dead phone and wet clothes. I have $5,000 I refuse to touch and zero business experience beyond designing a logistics model on napkins. Julian's correction was firm, allowing no argument. You are the co-founder of Streamline Logistics, uncredited and uncompensated. You know where the bodies are buried in Marcus's company because you helped dig the graves. You know the weak points in the distribution chain, the vendors he's screwed over, the contracts he's violated, the corners he's cut. I have the capital, billions of it, sitting in dormant accounts earning interest while I've been hiding in this house feeling sorry for myself. I need a face. I need someone they'll underestimate. I need a warrior." He opened the folder, revealing page after page of legal documents. "This is a contract. It gives you 50% equity in a new venture, Phoenix Holdings. We will buy up the supply chain Marcus needs before the merger goes through. We will squeeze him. We will make his company worthless before he can sign that deal with Vortex. We'll do it legally, systematically, and so thoroughly that he won't even see it coming until it's too late." Sarah looked down at the contract, her exhausted brain trying to process what he was offering. It was insane. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of crazy that might actually work. Her voice shook as she asked, "And in return, what do I owe you?" Julian's smile turned wicked, transforming his face from merely handsome to devastatingly dangerous. "In return, you get to see the look on Marcus Kane's face when he realizes he divorced the woman who was about to become his boss. You get to watch him squirm. You get justice, Sarah. Real justice, not the kind that comes from lawyers who bill by the hour and tell you to be grateful for $5,000. Sarah thought about the piano Marcus had donated to Goodwill like it was a broken lamp the Steinway her mother had saved for 10 years to buy the instrument Sarah had learned to play on before her mother got sick. She thought about Jessica redecorating her home, probably painting over the soft yellow walls Sarah had chosen because they reminded her of sunshine. She thought about the lawyer's sneer when he called her business plan napkins, like her work was literally garbage. She set the tea down with a click that sounded like a decision being made. She picked up a pen from the table, testing its weight. Her voice came out harder than she'd ever heard it steal where there used to be softness. "I don't need to read it. Where do I sign?" Julian's smile grew genuine pride lighting up his face. "Welcome to Phoenix Holdings, CEO Mitchell. The next 4 months are going to be hell. But I promise you this, when we're done, Marcus Kane will wish he'd never met you." The next 3 days were a blur, but they were not spent in a salon getting makeovers and manicures. Julian Blackwell didn't believe in transformation through superficial changes. He believed in war, and wars were won with ammunition. His voice echoed off concrete walls as he led her down to a basement that had been converted into something between a bunker and a tech startup. "You are entering a war zone. Fashion is just camouflage. Knowledge is ammunition. And right now, you're going into battle unarmed." The war room, as Julian called it, was a maze of computer servers, monitors, displaying real-time stock tickers and financial news feeds, and whiteboards covered in diagrams that looked like battle plans because that's exactly what they were. Julian pulled up a chair in front of a terminal, gesturing for her to sit. "Marcus's stock price is at $45.20. It's artificially inflated because of the merger rumors. Investors are betting on Vortex's proven track record combined with Streamline's distribution network. We are going to short it. Do you know how to short a stock, Sarah?" She hesitated, remembering economics classes she'd taken before dropping out to support Marcus. I think so." Julian's response was sharp but encouraging. "Don't think. No. If you bet the price goes down and you make it go down, you win. Simple as that. We're going to make Marcus's stock worthless, and we're going to make money doing it." He pulled up spreadsheets that made Sarah's eyes cross. "Marcus relies on the East Coast hub in Jersey City. Who owns the lease on that warehouse?" Sarah closed her eyes. Accessing memories she'd tried to bury late nights doing Marcus's paperwork while he slept off networking drinks, organizing files he was too important to organize himself. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "The lease. It's up for renewal next month, owned by Kensington Properties. It's a 5-year lease that expires December 1st. Julian's fingers flew over the keyboard with the speed of someone who'd spent years day trading. "Good. I just bought Kensington Properties. As of 5 minutes ago, we are Marcus's landlords, and we are going to triple the rent." For 72 hours, Julian drilled her like a recruit in boot camp. He taught her corporate law, how to read 10K filings, how to spot fraud in quarterly earnings reports. He taught her negotiation tactics, how to read body language in hostile boardrooms, how to use silence as a weapon. He didn't treat her like a student. He treated her like a partner, respecting her intelligence enough to challenge it. The first week bled into the second. Phoenix Holdings was incorporated in Delaware paperwork, filed with precision that spoke to years of experience Julian had gained before his self-imposed exile. Legal teams were assembled, non-disclosure agreements, signed, shell companies created to hide their movements until the perfect moment to strike. Late nights in the war room became routine. Julian would bring coffee at 3 in the morning, 2 sugars exactly the way she'd mentioned she liked it once in passing. They shared insomnia and pain and moments of unexpected laughter over Marcus's incompetent emails that Julian had somehow acquired through methods he refused to explain. His voice carried dark amusement as he pulled up an email chain. He CC'd his lawyer on an email about moving assets to avoid tax liability. He literally created evidence of tax fraud and sent it to 6 people. He's an idiot. Sarah's laugh was bitter but genuine. He's my idiot. Was my idiot. God, I wasted 10 years. Julian's response was quiet but firm. You didn't waste them. You were building something. He just forgot to put your name on it. We're going to remind him. The second month was dedicated to financial maneuvers. They didn't buy Streamline's debt overnight that would have triggered alarms. Instead, they bought it piece by piece using different shell companies, spreading purchases across weeks to avoid detection. They purchased shipping contracts from vendors Marcus relied on, offering better terms and faster payment. They acquired warehouse space in strategic locations that would strangle Streamline's distribution network if they chose to close them. Sarah learned to read stock charts like she used to read design specs, finding patterns in the chaos. Julian taught her the language of high finance, translating terms that had always intimidated her into concepts she could grasp and master. His explanations were clinical, but never condescending. Read these 10K filings. Marcus lied about maintenance costs, claimed the fleet was fully operational when 3 trucks have been in the shop for 6 months. The Jersey City hub is the only facility certified for medical transport, which means if we close it, Vortex loses a $3 billion government pharmaceutical contract. That's leverage. By the 3rd month, Sarah knew more about Marcus's company than he did. She knew which vendors he'd screwed over with late payments, which employees he'd fired for asking uncomfortable questions, which corners he'd cut to make quarterly numbers look good for investors. She built dossiers, assembled evidence, created a map of his empire that showed every weak point, every vulnerability, every place where pressure would make the whole structure collapse. But they also had to address the camouflage Julian mentioned. On the afternoon of the 3rd day of the 3rd month, a team of stylists arrived at the mansion, not the flashy types who worked for pop stars, but serious, silent professionals who dressed presidents and first ladies. Julian's instructions to the head stylist, a severe woman named Catherine Russo, were precise and non-negotiable. No pink, no frills, nothing that says, trying too hard. Sarah is not a flower, she is a blade. Dress her like a weapon. When Sarah finally stepped out of the dressing room after hours of fittings and adjustments, Julian was waiting in the foyer checking his watch. He stopped mid-motion, the watch forgotten. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet, structured and sleek, that hugged her curves but offered no apology for taking up space. It had a high slit up the leg that showed strength, not seduction, and a neckline that was daring, yet regal. Her hair, usually thrown into a messy bun because she never had time for more, had been blown out into sleek, dark waves that cascaded over one shoulder. She wore no jewelry, except for a pair of sharp diamond earrings that caught the light like daggers borrowed from Catherine's personal collection. She looked expensive. She looked dangerous. She looked nothing like the woman who had cried in the rain 4 months ago. Sarah's voice carried uncertainty she hated hearing in herself. Well, is it too much? Julian walked toward her, each step deliberate. He reached out his hand, hovering near her face for a moment before he gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered for a second, sending electricity through her that had nothing to do with business strategies and everything to do with the way he was looking at her. His voice dropped an octave, soft and dangerous. It's perfect. Marcus is going to have a heart attack. Let's hope the paramedics are slow." He offered her his arm, the gesture formal, but the warmth in his eyes anything but. "The car is waiting. The Global Tech Summit starts in an hour. Time to show the world who Sarah Mitchell really is." The Global Tech Summit was held at the Jacob Javits Center, a glass palace on Manhattan's west side that jutted into the Hudson like a crystal shard. It was a sea of black suits, flashing cameras, and billion-dollar egos measuring themselves against each other with the subtlety of peacocks in mating season. Marcus Kane stood near the center stage holding a glass of champagne that probably cost more than Sarah used to make in a week at the diner. Jessica clung to his arm wearing a flashy red dress that looked like something borrowed from a prom costume collection. She was pretty in the way magazine covers are pretty all surface, no depth, the kind of beauty that photographs well but disappears when you turn off the lights. Jessica's voice carried the breathy quality of someone who thought it made her sound sophisticated. "You look tense, babe. This is supposed to be your night." Marcus adjusted his tie for the third time in as many minutes, his jaw tight. "I'm fine. I just haven't heard back from the lawyers about the Jersey City lease renewal. It's a minor hiccup, but I wanted it resolved before the announcement." A reporter from Forbes approached with a microphone and a smile that promised uncomfortable questions. "Mr. Kane, are the rumors true? Is the merger with Vortex Corporation a done deal?" Marcus deployed his media smile, the one he'd practiced in the mirror, until it looked natural. "We're very close, Mike. Tonight is about celebrating the future. Streamline Logistics is evolving into something bigger than any of us imagined. This is just the beginning." The reporter's follow-up question had teeth hidden in it. "And what about your wife? We heard the divorce was finalized just days ago. Some are saying the timing is suspicious." Marcus's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before he recovered. "Sarah and I grew apart. She preferred a simpler life. The corporate world wasn't for her. We parted amicably, and I wish her nothing but the best." The voice that rang out across the hall was clear and commanding, cutting through the ambient chatter like a knife through silk. "Is that so?" It didn't come from a microphone, but it carried such authority that nearby conversations died instantly, silence spreading outward in ripples. Marcus turned around. The glass of champagne slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor, golden liquid spreading like blood at a crime scene. Standing at the top of the grand staircase entrance was Sarah Mitchell. But it wasn't the Sarah he knew, the one who apologized for existing and made herself small in corners. This woman radiated power. Flashbulbs erupted like lightning photographers, sensing a story unfolding in real time. And beside her, holding her hand with casual possessiveness, was a ghost made flesh. Someone in the crowd gasped loud enough to be heard, "Julian Blackwell, is that Blackwell?" The whisper became a murmur, became a roar. "I thought he was dead. Where has he been? Blackwell and Kane's ex-wife. What the hell is happening? Julian Blackwell, the legend, the myth, the boy king who'd burned out and disappeared had returned. And he was with Marcus Kane's ex-wife, holding her hand like she was the most precious thing in the room." Sarah and Julian descended the stairs. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea people scrambling to get out of their way or get closer for a better look, cameras flashing so brightly it felt like walking through a lightning storm. They walked straight toward Marcus and Jessica with the inevitability of a Greek tragedy reaching its final act. Marcus's face had gone pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. "Sarah, what are you doing here? You don't have an invitation. This is a private event." Sarah stopped inches from him. She towered over him in her heels, and the reversal of their usual power dynamic was so complete it felt like watching the world turn upside down. She looked at Jessica, then back at Marcus, her expression one of cool amusement that didn't reach her eyes. Her voice was smooth as silk and just as dangerous. "Actually, Marcus, I'm here as a keynote speaker and as the new majority shareholder of Phoenix Holdings." Marcus stammered, his carefully constructed media persona cracking. "Phoenix what? What are you talking about?" Julian stepped forward, his eyes locked onto Marcus's with predatory delight. The company that just bought your debt. All of it. We need to talk about your eviction notice from the Jersey City facility. I believe the new lease terms were sent to your office this morning. Triple the previous rate effective immediately. The color drained from Marcus's face completely, leaving him the pale gray of old newspaper. The cameras captured every second, every micro-expression of horror and confusion and dawning realization. Sarah leaned in close to Marcus, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something expensive she'd never worn before, a scent he'd never bought her because he'd never thought she deserved it. You said I was a startup cost, a placeholder. We're about to audit your books, Marcus, and I never miss a decimal point. The following Monday morning, the headquarters of Streamline Logistics was in controlled chaos. The stock had plummeted 14% after the scene at the summit, erasing $40 million in market cap overnight. Shareholders were panicking, flooding the investor relations line with demands for explanations. The board of directors had called an emergency meeting for 10 a.m., and it was already 9:45. Marcus sat at the head of the long glass conference table, sweating through his shirt, despite the aggressive air conditioning. To his right sat Victor Ashford, the CEO of Vortex Corporation. Ashford was a shark in human skin, bald, 60 years old, with eyes that blinked too slowly, and a smile that never reached those eyes. He was here to ensure his merger didn't fall apart, and his presence filled the room with the kind of cold that had nothing to do with temperature. Marcus's voice shook as he tried to project confidence he didn't feel. This is a minor setback. My ex-wife is emotional acting out because she's hurt. This Phoenix Holdings is a shell company. They can't possibly have the resources to hurt us. Julian Blackwell has been out of the game for 5 years. He's a recluse, probably not even mentally stable. The double doors to the conference room didn't just open. They were pushed with force, slamming against the walls hard enough to make several board members jump. Sarah walked in wearing a sharp white suit the color of fresh snow or blank slates, or mourning in some cultures, but today the color of a clean kill. Julian walked a step behind her, carrying a briefcase that looked deceptively slim for something that contained the ammunition to destroy a company. Marcus shot to his feet, his voice climbing into registers he probably didn't know he could hit. You can't be in here. This is a private board meeting. Security. Sarah's voice was calm, authoritative, the voice of someone who belonged exactly where she was standing. Sit down, Marcus. She didn't look at him. She looked at the board members, making eye contact with each one in turn, watching them shift uncomfortably under her gaze. I am the CEO of Phoenix Holdings. As of this morning, we own 51% of your debt obligations and the land under your 3 largest distribution centers. If you want security to throw me out, I'll have to evict your entire inventory first. $40 million worth of merchandise sitting in warehouses I now control. A murmur of terror rippled through the board. Sarah walked to the front of the room. Marcus was forced to step aside or be physically brushed away like lint. She took the seat at the head of the table, his seat the throne he'd occupied for 5 years while taking credit for her work. Her voice carried the weight of someone who'd done her homework and knew exactly where the bodies were buried. Here is the reality, gentlemen. Marcus built this company on a logistics model I designed. It works beautifully, actually. But in his haste to impress you, Mr. Ashford, he cut corners. Dangerous corners. She gestured to Julian, who connected a laptop to the room's projection system. Numbers and red-lined documents filled the wall, damning evidence laid out with surgical precision. Sarah's presentation was clinical, devastating. He stopped paying maintenance contracts on the transport fleet 6 months ago to inflate quarterly profits. 12 trucks are currently operating with expired safety certifications. He's been routing shipments through shell companies to hide losses from the Seattle expansion that failed. And the Jersey City hub, the one I now own, is the only facility certified for medical transport under federal regulations. She turned to Victor Ashford, speaking directly to him with the confidence of someone holding all the cards. If I close that hub tomorrow, Vortex loses its pharmaceutical contract with the Department of Defense. That's a $3 billion loss. Your board won't be happy about that, Mr. Ashford. Your shareholders will be even less thrilled. Ashford looked at the file, then at Marcus, his face unreadable. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning and someone's nervous breathing. Ashford's voice was flat businesslike, already writing Marcus off. "What do you want?" Sarah stood up, her eyes blazing with controlled fury. "I want the merger canceled. I want Marcus removed as CEO for gross incompetence and financial fraud. And I want Streamline Logistics to be absorbed into Phoenix Holdings at a discount that reflects its actual value, not the inflated numbers he's been feeding investors." Marcus screamed, the sound of a man watching his world collapse. "You're insane. I built this. You were just a waitress who got lucky." Sarah's voice cut through his outburst like ice. "I was the partner you forgot to value. And now I'm the creditor you can't afford to pay. There's a difference between luck and justice, Marcus. You're about to learn it." Marcus looked around the room, desperately searching for allies, for someone to save him. His eyes landed on Jessica, who was sitting in the corner taking notes, her role as chief of staff suddenly feeling very uncertain. His voice cracked as he barked orders at her. "Jessica, call the legal team. Get Morrison on the phone. We're not going down without a fight." Jessica slowly closed her notebook. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, her eyes moving between Marcus, sweating, desperate, defeated, and Sarah, powerful, radiant, commanding the room with the kind of presence Marcus had always pretended to have, but never actually possessed. Jessica's voice was calm, almost apologetic. "Actually, Marcus, I think I'm resigning, effective immediately. I don't date bankrupt men, and I definitely don't work for them." She walked out, her heels clicking on the marble floor. The door closing behind her sounded like a gunshot, final and irrevocable. Marcus slumped into a chair, his body language screaming defeat. The board didn't even wait for Victor Ashford's input. They voted unanimously, hands shooting up with the speed of people abandoning a sinking ship. 5 minutes later, Marcus was out. Security was called, but not for Sarah, for Marcus to escort him from the building he'd thought he owned. Sarah walked out of the conference room with Julian, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. They got into the back of his limousine, a vintage Rolls-Royce that smelled like leather and money and victory. Her laugh came out breathless, almost manic. "We did it. Did you see his face? Did you see the board turn on him?" Julian was watching her with an intensity that made her skin feel electric. His voice carried pride and something deeper, something that had been building between them for 4 months of late nights and shared purpose. "You were magnificent, Sarah. You didn't just win. You ruled that room. You made grown men afraid of you." He reached out and took her hand, the touch sending heat up her arm. The chemistry that had been simmering between them for months finally boiled over in the privacy of the car's tinted windows. Sarah leaned in and Julian met her halfway. He kissed her, fierce, passionate, tasting like coffee and victory and rain and English breakfast tea. For a moment, everything was perfect. The revenge was complete. The man who'd destroyed her was destroyed in turn, and she was in the arms of someone who saw her, really saw her for exactly who she was. But in the world of high-stakes business, perfection is usually a warning sign. It's the moment before the trap springs, the calm before the storm, the breath before the blade falls. 2 days after the takeover, Sarah was sitting in her new office, Marcus's old office, though she'd already started changing everything about it. The furniture was being replaced, the walls repainted, every trace of him systematically erased like he'd never existed. Julian had gone to the bank to finalize the asset transfers, the legal paperwork that would make their victory official and permanent. He'd left his phone on the desk, forgotten in his rush, still plugged into the charger. It buzzed. Once, twice. A text message lighting up the screen. Sarah glanced at it, intending to ignore it, respecting privacy, even though every instinct told her something was wrong. But the name on the screen froze her blood, stopping her heart mid-beat. Victor Ashford. Why was the CEO of Vortex texting Julian? They were supposed to be enemies, adversaries in a war that had cost Julian his wife and his company and 5 years of his life. Curiosity, cold, sharp, the kind that killed cats and ruined lives, pricked her skin. She knew she shouldn't look. She knew it was a violation of trust. But Marcus had taught her that trust was for fools, and Julian had promised her transparency, had promised her partnership, had promised her she wasn't just another pawn in someone else's game. She unlocked the phone. The passcode was 1428, the address of his house, the number on the door she'd knocked on in the rain 4 months ago. He'd told her that the first week said it was his way of remembering that good things could come from wrong turns. She opened the message. The words on the screen rearranged her entire reality like a kaleidoscope twisted into a new pattern. The girl has done her part. Kane is crushed. When do we announce that Phoenix is actually a subsidiary of Vortex? I want my algorithm back, Julian. As agreed. Sarah stopped breathing. The world tilted on its axis, everything she thought she knew, sliding into new configurations that made terrible, horrible sense. Phoenix is a subsidiary of Vortex. As agreed. The girl has done her part. The implications hit her like physical blows. Julian and Victor Ashford were working together. This whole thing, the rescue, the revenge, the Phoenix Holdings, the partnership, was just a way for Julian to get his technology back from Vortex. And she was just the weapon he'd used to destroy Marcus, so Victor would make a deal. Her voice came out as a whisper, talking to the empty room. No, he wouldn't. He couldn't. She scrolled up frantically, looking for more evidence for context that would make this make sense. The previous messages had been deleted, cleaned out, leaving only this one damning conversation visible. She heard the elevator ding, Julian's footsteps in the hallway, confident and quick. He walked in carrying a bottle of champagne Dom Perignon, the expensive kind, and wearing a smile that transformed his usually serious face into something boyish and genuine. His voice was full of uncomplicated joy. I got the signatures. It's official, Sarah. We own it all. Streamline is ours. Marcus is finished, and you are officially the CEO of a multi-million-dollar logistics empire. We should celebrate. Sarah stood up, holding the phone out like it was a grenade, with the pin pulled like it was evidence at a trial, like it was the proof that she was the stupidest woman alive. Victor Ashford just texted you. He asked when you're going to hand Phoenix over to him. He said, as agreed. He called me the girl, like I'm some kind of tool you used and now you're done with. Julian's face went pale, the joy evaporating instantly like water on hot stone. The champagne bottle slipped from his hand but didn't break, rolling across the floor in lazy circles. Sarah, wait. Don't read that out of context. Let me explain. Her laugh was broken, jagged, the sound of something shattering. Context. What context makes as agreed sound good? You told me Victor Ashford was your enemy. You told me he stole your life's work, destroyed your wife, ruined everything. But you're working with him. She felt tears of rage and betrayal burning her eyes. Was this whole thing a setup? Did you just use me to get Marcus out of the way so you could sell the company back to Vortex and get your algorithm? Was I just another napkin plan, something disposable you used and threw away? Julian stepped toward her hands, out like he was approaching a frightened animal. It's not like that. Yes, Victor approached me. He knew I was the only one who could take Marcus down, the only one with the resources and the knowledge and the motivation. He offered to return my intellectual property, the code that's legally his, the algorithm that's worth billions, if I facilitated the takeover of Streamline. His voice was desperate, pleading, but that was before. That was the plan 4 months ago, before I knew you, before I understood what Marcus had done. I haven't responded to Victor because I'm not going to give it to him. I was going to double-cross him, take everything and leave him with nothing. Sarah's voice was dead empty of everything except pain. How can I believe you? Marcus lied to me for 10 years. You managed to do it in 4 months. At least he was honest about what he was: a user, a narcissist, someone who took and never gave back. But you made me believe we were partners. You made me believe you cared. Julian's voice cracked. I do care. Everything changed when I met you, Sarah. I started this for the algorithm, yes. I was angry and broken, and I wanted revenge on Victor for what he did to Elena, for what he took from me. But then you knocked on my door in the rain, and everything shifted. He took another step closer. I fell in love with you. Not with the weapon I could use, not with the insider information you possessed, but with you. The woman who refused to take Marcus's money even when she had nothing. The woman who learned corporate law in 72 hours because she was determined to fight. The woman who walked into that boardroom and made grown men afraid. Sarah grabbed her purse, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. If you walk out that door, Victor will come after you. He's dangerous, Sarah. He doesn't lose gracefully. Please just let me show you the emails. Let me prove I'm telling the truth. Her voice was final, a door slamming shut. I survived Marcus. I can survive you. She walked out of the office past the confused secretaries who'd been hired to work for her into the elevator. She felt shattered all over again, the victory from 2 days ago turning to ash in her mouth. The man she was falling for was a liar just like Marcus. The partnership was fake. She was alone again, except this time it hurt worse because she'd let herself hope. She stepped out onto the street, blinded by tears and rage, and the kind of heartbreak that comes from being betrayed twice in 4 months. A black van pulled up to the curb with the kind of timing that suggested it had been waiting for exactly this moment. The side door slid open smoothly, well-oiled and silent. 2 men in dark suits stepped out, moving with military precision. They weren't aggressive, weren't rough, but they radiated the kind of competence that suggested resistance would be futile. The taller one's voice was polite, almost apologetic. "Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Ashford would like a word." Sarah opened her mouth to scream, but a hand covered it, not violently, just firmly enough to prevent sound. They guided her into the van with the efficiency of people who'd done this before. As the door slid shut, she saw Julian running out of the building, shouting her name, his face a mask of terror. But it was too late. The van merged into New York traffic, just another black vehicle in a sea of them. She was alone again, except this time she wasn't just fighting for her dignity. She was fighting for her life. The inside of the van smelled sterile leather and expensive cologne, the scent of a kidnapping that had been paid for with a corporate credit card and planned with the same attention to detail as a board meeting. Sarah sat between the 2 men, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape her chest. She didn't scream. She didn't struggle. She'd learned in the last 4 months that in this world, physical resistance was useless. This was a war of leverage, and right now, she had none. Her mind replayed the image of Julian running after the van, the desperation on his face. Was it real? Was any of it real? That text message from Victor Ashford, as agreed, had shattered the fragile trust she'd built. If Julian was just using her to get his algorithm back, then she wasn't a CEO. She was just a pawn who'd been promoted to queen solely to be sacrificed in the endgame. The van slowed, turning into the underground garage of a glass spire that pierced the Manhattan skyline like a needle. Vortex Tower. She'd seen it in the financial district before, always from the outside, a monument to the kind of power she'd never imagined touching. One of the guards gestured politely, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Please, Miss Mitchell, Mr. Ashford is waiting." They escorted her into a private elevator. As the numbers climbed 40, 50, 60, Sarah straightened her spine. She checked her reflection in the polished steel doors. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, but her jaw was set. She remembered the woman who'd stood in the rain outside Julian's house 4 months ago, broken and defeated. That woman was gone. The woman in the elevator had bankrupted a CEO in a week. She could handle Victor Ashford. The doors opened directly into a penthouse office that spanned the entire floor. It was cold, cavernous, all glass and steel, overlooking the Hudson River. The city lights below looked like spilled jewels, beautiful and completely indifferent to the drama playing out above them. Victor Ashford stood by the window, his back to her, holding a crystal tumbler of what was probably scotch, older than Sarah. He was a small man, physically maybe 5'8", slim build, but he carried himself with the heavy gravity of someone who owned senators and made billion-dollar decisions before breakfast. His voice was cultured, almost friendly. "Thank you for joining me, Sarah. I apologize for the dramatic invitation, but Julian has been difficult. He stopped answering my calls. I assume you know why." Sarah walked further into the room, refusing to be intimidated by the space or the view or the man who controlled both. I saw the text. As agreed. You and Julian were working together. Ashford turned around, his smile thin and reptilian. Working together is a strong phrase. Let's say we had a mutual alignment of interests. Julian wanted his legacy back, the shipping algorithm I acquired 5 years ago through perfectly legal means. I wanted streamlined logistics absorbed into Vortex to solidify our market position. We made a trade. He took a sip of his scotch, savoring it. He would use you to destroy Marcus Kane, driving the stock price down so I could acquire the company cheaply. In exchange, I would return his intellectual property, not out of generosity, you understand, but because I've already extracted its value. The algorithm is old technology now. I've moved on to better things. Sarah felt bile rising in her throat. So it was all a lie. The rescue, the Phoenix Holdings, the partnership. It was just a performance. Ashford walked to his massive glass desk. Every movement calculated. Julian is a method actor, my dear. He needed a face for the hostile takeover, someone with insider knowledge and a sympathetic backstory. The scorned wife, it's perfect, really. The media loved it. You were the weapon we needed. But now the war is over. The weapon needs to be decommissioned. He sat down and slid a thick document across the desk. Beside it lay a gold fountain pen that probably cost more than Sarah's first car. His explanation was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing quarterly earnings. This transfers full ownership of Phoenix Holdings and, by extension, the assets of Streamline Logistics to Vortex Corporation. Sign it, Sarah. Her voice was steady despite the trembling of her hands. And if I don't, Ashford sighed like a teacher disappointed in a slow student. If you don't, I will tie you up in litigation for the next 20 years. I will freeze your assets, sue you for corporate espionage, fraud, breach of contract. I will make sure that the $5,000 Marcus gave you looks like a fortune compared to what you'll have left. You'll be destitute, Sarah. Back to the diner, back to waiting tables, back to being invisible. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. But if you sign, I will wire $10 million to an offshore account in your name tonight. You can leave New York. You can leave the heartbreak. You can disappear somewhere warm and never think about Marcus Kane or Julian Blackwell or any of this ever again. You can be free. $10 million. Sarah looked at the pen, the metal cold and heavy in her imagination. It was freedom. It was safety. It was a guarantee that she would never have to rely on a man like Marcus or a liar like Julian ever again. She could start over somewhere else, rebuild her life without the weight of betrayal crushing her. Her voice came out soft, almost conversational. Why do you need me to sign? If you and Julian had a deal, why isn't he here signing it? Ashford's expression darkened for just a fraction of a second before he smoothed it over. Julian is sentimental. He's having second thoughts, thinks he can renegotiate the terms now that he's developed feelings. But he forgets that I hold the cards. I have the patent on the algorithm. Without me, his life's work is legally mine forever. He'll come around once he realizes there's no other option. Sarah reached for the pen. The metal was cold against her skin, solid and real in a way that the last 4 months hadn't been. She thought about the thrill of the boardroom, the way Julian looked at her when she solved the logistics problem in the Jersey City hub, the kiss in the limousine that tasted like victory and possibility. Was it all fake? Could a man fake the way his heartbeat sped up when he touched her? Could someone manufacture the look in his eyes when he called her magnificent? She looked at Ashford. This man who dealt in commodities and contracts and human beings like they were all the same thing. You said Julian is having second thoughts. That means he hasn't agreed to give you the company yet. That means whatever deal you had is falling apart. Ashford's voice snapped with irritation. He will agree. Once he knows you've taken the money and disappeared, he'll realize there's nothing left to fight for. He'll give me Phoenix and take his algorithm and crawl back to his mansion to hide for another 5 years. Sarah held the pen over the paper. The ink was ready to flow. All she had to do was write Sarah Mitchell in the space provided, and this nightmare would be over. She could disappear. She could be safe. Then she remembered the first night at 1428 Willoughby Street. Julian hadn't asked for her resume. He hadn't asked about her connections or her skills or what she could do for him. He'd asked if she took her tea with lemon. He'd seen her when she was invisible to the world, had offered warmth and shelter and partnership when she had nothing to offer in return. Her voice came out as a whisper, then grew stronger. No. She dropped the pen. It clattered on the glass desk like a gunshot. Sarah stood up, her voice gaining power with each word. I won't sign. Maybe Julian was using me. Maybe this whole thing was a setup from the beginning. But I built Phoenix Holdings. I sat in that chair. I fired Marcus. I did that. And I'm not selling my self-respect for $10 million. Not to you, not to anyone. She picked up the contract with slow, deliberate motion. She tore it down the middle. Then she tore it again and again, letting the pieces flutter onto Ashford's pristine desk like confetti at a funeral. Ashford's whisper was shaking with rage. Get out! Security! The double doors to the office didn't just open, they exploded inward. The two guards who'd been stationed outside stumbling into the room, shoved violently by a force of nature. Julian Blackwell stood in the doorway looking wild. His coat was gone, his shirt torn at the shoulder revealing a bruise forming on his collarbone. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving, his hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. He looked like he'd fought his way through every security guard in the building, and based on the commotion Sarah could hear in the hallway behind him, that's probably exactly what he'd done. His roar echoed off the glass walls. Get away from her, Victor! Ashford stood up, knocking his chair over. You barge into my office, assault my staff. This is criminal trespassing, Julian. I'll have you arrested. Julian ignored him completely. He walked straight to Sarah, his eyes scanning her face for injuries, for signs of harm. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip tight and desperate. Did you sign, Sarah? Tell me you didn't sign? Her voice broke. I didn't. I tore it up. Julian let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He pulled her into his chest, burying his face in her hair, and for a moment in the middle of the enemy's lair he just held her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to earth. His voice was muffled against her hair. Thank God, I thought I was too late. I thought you'd take the money and I'd lose you. Sarah pulled back, confusion and anger warring in her chest. Lose me. Victor said you wanted the algorithm. He said that was the deal, that I was just a weapon you used. Julian turned to face Ashford, keeping Sarah firmly behind him. That was the offer, Victor, not the deal. I never agreed to give you Phoenix. I never agreed to betray her. Ashford's scream was losing composure. You wanted your code back. It's the only thing you've cared about for 5 years. It's your legacy, your life's work. Julian's voice dropped to deadly calm. It was my legacy, until I found something worth more. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black tablet. He held it up the screen, glowing in the dim office. You think you have leverage over me because you hold the patent to the Blackwell protocol, right? You think because you stole it, I can't use it without your permission. You think I need you. Ashford narrowed his eyes. I have armies of lawyers, Julian. If you try to use that code in Phoenix's logistics system, I will shut you down in an hour. You'll be bankrupt by sunset. Julian's smile was dangerous. Brilliant, the expression of someone who'd just won a game his opponent didn't know they were playing. That's why I didn't use it. And that's why you can't use it anymore either. The room went silent except for the hum of the building's climate control. Julian tapped the screen. 5 minutes ago, I uploaded the complete source code of the Blackwell protocol to the global open source repository. I released the encryption keys. I published the entire architecture, every line of code, every algorithm, every innovation I spent 6 years developing. Ashford's face went from red to ghostly white. You released it to the public, to everyone. Julian nodded, and the gesture was final. To universities, to startups, to every shipping company in China, Europe, South America, and America. By tomorrow morning, your competitors will be building their own systems on my technology free of charge, no licensing fees, no patents to navigate. The proprietary technology that gave Vortex its edge is now as common as the air we breathe. Ashford scrambled for his keyboard, typing frantically. Sarah watched his face as he read the screen, watched the exact moment his empire crumbled. The proprietary technology that had been worth $20 billion, the code he'd blackmailed and stolen and killed for, was now worthless. It was public domain, accessible to anyone with an internet connection. His gasp was the sound of a man drowning. You destroyed it. That code was worth $20 billion. You just burned $20 billion to make a point. Julian's voice was cold, final. I burned your leverage. I burned the leash you had on me. Money is just paper, Victor. It's just numbers in computers. I would burn the whole world down before I let you think for 1 second that I didn't love her. He turned to Sarah, his expression softening in a way that made her chest ache. You were right. I did start this to get the code back. I wanted revenge on Victor for what he did to Elena for the 5 years I lost hiding in that house. But when I saw you walking out of my office today, when I realized you thought I was just like Marcus, I understood something. His voice was raw, honest. $20 billion is just noise. It's just code. I can write new algorithms, build new companies, make new fortunes, but I can't find another you. I can't replace the woman who knocked on my door in a storm and reminded me what it meant to be human instead of just angry. Sarah felt tears spilling over, but they were different this time. Not tears of betrayal, but of something she was afraid to name. You idiot. You brilliant, stupid idiot. That was your life's work. Julian grinned, wiping a tear from her cheek with his thumb. My life's work is standing right here. Everything else is just background noise. He turned back to Ashford, who was slumped in his chair staring at his computer screen where his stock value was probably already plummeting. We're leaving, Victor. Phoenix Holdings is independent. We have the assets, we have Marcus's distribution network, and we have Sarah Mitchell. We don't need your stolen algorithm anymore. We're going to beat you the old-fashioned way. We're going to outwork you, out-innovate you, and outlast you. Julian took Sarah's hand. Ready to go home. Sarah's voice was steady. Not to 1428 Willoughby. Let's go to our headquarters. I have a company to run. We have a company to run. They walked out of the penthouse, leaving Victor Ashford alone in his glass tower, surrounded by wealth that suddenly felt very, very fragile. The ride back from Vortex Tower was quiet, but it wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of exhaustion and relief, the kind that comes after surviving something that should have killed you. Julian sat close to her in the back of the Rolls-Royce, his hand never leaving hers, thumb tracing circles on her palm like he was reminding himself she was real. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. I'm sorry. I should have told you about Victor's texts from the beginning. I thought I could handle him, thought I could outsmart him without dragging you into the mud. That was arrogant. Sarah turned to him, studying his profile in the passing streetlights. You did handle him. Dramatically expensively, but you handled him. She squeezed his hand. But Julian, the code. Are you really okay? That was your life's work. 6 years of development, $20 billion in value. You just gave it away. Julian looked at her, and the expression on his face was lighter than she'd ever seen it. For 5 years I sat in that house guarding that code like a dragon guarding gold. It made me miserable. It made me lonely. It made me into something I didn't recognize. Tonight, when I hit upload, when I released it to the world, I didn't feel loss. I felt light. I felt free for the first time since Elena died. He lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles, the gesture tender. I can write new code, Sarah. I can build new algorithms, create new innovations that make the Blackwell protocol look like a calculator compared to a supercomputer. But I can't find another you. I can't replace the woman who tore up a $10 million contract because she refused to sell her self-respect. Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the weight of the last 4 months settle into something that might eventually become peace. Well, Mr. Blackwell, since you're currently unemployed and your best work is now public property, I suppose I have a job opening at Phoenix. We need a chief technology officer, but you'll have to interview. I have standards. Julian's laugh rumbled through his chest. I have excellent references, and I sleep with the boss, which I hear helps. Her voice was teasing but warm. "We'll see about that. I'm very professional. There are rules about workplace relationships." His response was a murmur against her hair. "Then I quit. Hire me back tomorrow after we break every rule you're thinking about." The next 6 months were a blur of activity that made the 4 months of preparation look leisurely by comparison. Phoenix Holdings didn't just absorb streamlined logistics, it transformed it, rebuilt it from the ground up, using Sarah's original vision without Marcus's cost-cutting and corner-cutting. The Jersey City hub was renovated, updated with new safety systems and equipment that hadn't been serviced in years. Sarah personally oversaw the installation, walking the warehouse floor in steel-toed boots and a hard hat, talking to workers who remembered when she used to bring Marcus his lunch during the startup days. They remembered her. Marcus had forgotten them. The Seattle expansion that Marcus had bungled was reopened this time with proper market research and local partnerships. Julian's new logistics AI, developed in 3 months of obsessive coding-optimized routes in real time, reducing delivery times by 30% and fuel costs by 25%. The media coverage was relentless. Forbes ran a cover story, "The Woman Who Rebuilt an Empire: How Sarah Mitchell Turned Betrayal into Billions." The Wall Street Journal did a deep dive into the Phoenix acquisition, calling it the most elegant hostile takeover in a decade. TechCrunch profiled Julian's return to the industry, his decision to open-source the Blackwell protocol, sparking debates about intellectual property and innovation. But the real work happened in quieter moments. Sarah built a leadership team from scratch, hiring people Marcus had fired for asking uncomfortable questions, promoting warehouse workers who understood logistics from the ground up, bringing in women who'd been told they were too aggressive for corporate America. She instituted profit sharing for all employees, not just executives. She created a whistleblower protection program after discovering how many people had known about Marcus's fraud but were too afraid to speak up. She opened the books to quarterly employee review, transparency as policy rather than exception. Julian worked from a corner office he'd specifically requested to be smaller than Sarah's, making it clear to everyone who was in charge. He rebuilt the technology infrastructure, implemented cybersecurity protocols that made Vortex's systems look like they were held together with duct tape, and started developing the next generation of shipping AI that learned and adapted in ways his old algorithm never could. They worked 18-hour days, fell into bed exhausted, woke up and did it again. It was brutal and exhilarating, and nothing like the soul-crushing work Sarah had done for Marcus, where every contribution was taken and every achievement was his. But there were also moments of unexpected sweetness. Julian teaching her chess in the library at 1428 Willoughby, which had become as much her home as his. Sarah teaching him to cook, he was terrible at it. Burned pasta she didn't know was possible to burn, but he tried with the same intensity he brought to everything. They took walks through Central Park at dawn before the city woke up, the only time they could be anonymous. He proposed on one of those walks 3 months after the Vortex confrontation. No ring, no elaborate plan, just the two of them watching the sun rise over the reservoir. His voice was simple, direct. "Sarah Mitchell, you knocked on my door when I was lost in the dark. You walked into my life and reminded me that surviving isn't the same as living. Will you marry me?" She laughed, tears streaming down her face. "You know I don't do anything without reading the fine print first. Where's the contract?" His grin was boyish. "Shall I draft 1 terms and conditions, arbitration clauses, exit strategies?" Her response was to kiss him until they both forgot what they were talking about. "No need. This time I trust the terms. Yes, absolutely yes." The engagement made headlines, of course. Everything they did made headlines now. But they kept the wedding small, 50 people in Central Park, same spot where he'd proposed. Sarah wore a simple ivory dress, no veil, no train, just clean lines that reminded Julian of the white suit she'd worn to destroy Marcus. He wore navy, no tuxedo, looking relaxed in a way that still surprised people who remembered the haunted recluse. Brenda was maid of honor, crying through the entire ceremony. She'd apologized 100 times for not being home the night Sarah showed up lost, but Sarah had forgiven her instantly. If Brenda had been home, Sarah would never have knocked on 1428 Willoughby. Wrong turns sometimes led to right destinations. The reception was held at the mansion, the library where they'd plotted revenge, now decorated with flowers and filled with laughter. Employees from Phoenix mingled with tech industry leaders who'd written Julian off as finished. Board members who'd voted to fire Marcus toasted the couple who'd made them all considerably richer. But the moment Sarah remembered most was quieter. Late in the evening, after most guests had left, she found Julian in his study, looking at financial reports even on his wedding day. She leaned against the doorframe. "Are you seriously working right now on our wedding night?" He looked up, his expression shifting from focused to soft. "Just checking something. Victor Ashford was forced out of Vortex yesterday. The board finally had enough. Stock price has been in free fall since we went public with the Blackwell protocol. Their competitors are eating them alive." Sarah walked over, taking the tablet from his hands. "Good. Let it burn. We have better things to do." His hands found her waist. "Such as?" Her voice was teasing. "Such as you teaching me that chess opening you've been threatening me with. The Sicilian defense." Julian laughed, the sound free and unguarded. "On our wedding night you want to play chess?" She kissed him, then pulled back. "I want to beat you at chess. Then we can discuss other activities." They played until 3 in the morning. She lost, but only barely, and the look of pride on his face when she nearly trapped his king was worth more than winning. 6 months after the wedding, Sarah stood in front of 200 women in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn. The space had been Vortex's East Coast Operations Center before Phoenix acquired it in the aftermath of Victor Ashford's ouster. Now it was something different, something better. The training center for women in tech and business occupied 3 floors of the former Vortex building. It offered free courses in everything from basic computer literacy to advanced corporate strategy. It provided child care, career counseling, and most importantly, a network of women who understood what it meant to restart your life after someone else tried to end it. Sarah had funded it with her own money, well, Phoenix's money, which was partly her money now. Julian had insisted on matching her contribution dollar for dollar, then anonymously donated another $5 million through a foundation he'd set up in Elena's name. The women in the audience ranged from their 20s to their 60s. Some were divorced, like Sarah had been. Some were widowed. Some had just been overlooked, underestimated, told they were too old or too young or too something to matter. They were here because they'd heard about the woman who'd been thrown away and had come back to burn down the empire that tried to bury her. Sarah's voice carried across the room without a microphone, strong and clear. "A year ago I stood in the rain with 2 suitcases and a broken heart. My husband of 10 years had divorced me, taken everything we'd built together, and left me with $5,000 like I was a contractor he was paying off. The world saw me as a victim, a cautionary tale, a woman who'd bet on the wrong man and lost everything." She paused, making eye contact with a woman in the 3rd row who looked exactly like Sarah had felt that November night. But here's what they didn't see. They didn't see that I had designed the logistics system that made my ex-husband's company valuable. They didn't see that I had skills, knowledge, capabilities that were worth more than any divorce settlement. They didn't see that I was an architect who'd been mistaken for decoration. Her voice gained intensity. I didn't win because I was special. I didn't win because I got lucky or because some man saved me. I won because I refused to accept someone else's valuation of my worth. Marcus Kane told me I was a startup, cost a placeholder, someone who existed to serve his vision. But I knew better. I had built his empire brick by brick, line of code by line of code. The only thing that changed was that I started believing in my own value. She moved across the stage, her presence commanding. "You don't need a Julian Blackwell with billions in the bank to rescue you. You need 3 things, and they're all within your control. First, know your worth. Document your contributions. Keep records of your work, your ideas, your innovations. In business, if it isn't signed, it didn't happen, so get it in writing. Build your paper trail." Her second point was practical, hard one. Second, build your network before you need it. I was lucky I had a college roommate who would have helped if I'd reached her. I had warehouse workers who remembered me. Make those connections now while you're strong so they're there when you're not. The third point was delivered with the weight of experience. Third, find your leverage. Every situation has pressure points. Every company has vulnerabilities. My ex-husband's weakness was that he'd built his empire on my design without understanding how it worked. When I removed that foundation, everything collapsed. Identify what only you know, what only you can do, and use it. Sarah's voice softened but didn't lose strength. To every woman here who's been told she's just a wife or just a mom or just a secretary, you're not just anything. You're the architect, the strategist, the force that makes things work. Someone else's failure to see you doesn't diminish your light. It just means they're blind, and blindness is their problem, not yours. She let the silence hold for a moment. Build your own door. And when you knock on it, answer it yourself. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for someone to validate you. You are already enough. You were always enough. Now go prove it to the world that was too stupid to see it. The standing ovation was immediate, thunderous. Women were on their feet, many crying, some shouting encouragement. Sarah saw herself in their faces, the hope and fear and determination that came from deciding to fight when surrender would be easier. After the speech, women lined up to talk to her. A 35-year-old accountant whose ex-husband had taken credit for her financial models. A 42-year-old software developer who'd been told she was too old to learn new languages. A 58-year-old widow trying to restart a career after 30 years raising children. Sarah talked to each one, gave real advice, made real connections. This wasn't PR, this wasn't image management. This was the work she cared about most, opening doors for women who'd been locked out the way she had been. One woman stood out waiting until the end. She was maybe 28, holding a portfolio with white-knuckled determination. Her voice shook as she introduced herself. I'm Rebecca Torres. I'm a former accountant. My ex-husband took credit for my financial restructuring models that saved his company $4 million. He's the one who presented them to the board. They think they're his. Sarah's attention focused completely. Do you have proof they're yours? Documentation, emails, drafts? Rebecca nodded, pulling out printed emails, revision histories, notes in her handwriting. Everything. I kept copies of everything because something told me I'd need them someday. Sarah handed her a business card, her own, with her direct number. Phoenix needs a financial controller. Our current system works, but it could be better. Interview Monday 9 a.m. Bring your portfolio, the real one with your models. If you're half as good as I think you are, the job's yours. Rebecca broke down crying, then pulled herself together. Thank you. Thank you so much. You don't know what this means. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. I know exactly what it means. I've been where you are. Now I'm where you're going to be. Don't waste the opportunity feeling grateful. Use it to build something amazing. The media coverage of the speech went viral. Clips circulated on social media, women sharing the Build Your Own Door quote with the fervor of people who'd found words for feelings they'd carried alone. The hashtag Build Your Own Door trended for 3 days. Applications to the training center tripled, then quintupled. Sarah had to hire additional staff just to process them all. But not everyone was pleased with Phoenix's success and Sarah's growing influence. 6 months after the training center opened, the FBI showed up at Streamline's, now Phoenix's headquarters, with a warrant. The lead agent was professional, almost apologetic. Ms. Mitchell, we're investigating allegations of securities fraud, market manipulation, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud related to the acquisition of Streamline Logistics. We have a warrant to seize your financial records, emails, and business documents from the period of September through December of last year. Sarah's blood ran cold, but her voice stayed steady. Who filed the complaint? The agent glanced at his paperwork. Anonymous tip, but it was detailed enough to warrant investigation. Someone knows a lot about your business practices during the acquisition. We'll try not to disrupt operations more than necessary. Sarah watched federal agents box up servers, copy hard drives, photograph documents. Julian stood beside her, his face calm, but his jaw tight. This is Victor. This has to be Victor. He's the only one who knows enough to make the allegations sound credible. Her mind was already working through possibilities. Can he actually make anything stick? We did everything legally. Aggressively, but legally. Julian's response was measured. Legal and prosecutable aren't always the same thing. If they want to build a case, they can twist aggressive business practices into market manipulation. The timing of our stock, shorting the warehouse acquisitions, the debt purchases in the right light, it looks coordinated. Sarah's voice was hard. Because it was coordinated. That was the point. But it wasn't illegal. The next 3 months were a legal nightmare. Depositions, document reviews, forensic accounting examinations. The SEC opened a parallel investigation. Trading in Phoenix stock was temporarily halted pending the inquiry. Shareholders panicked. The media, which had celebrated Sarah's rise, now questioned whether she'd crossed ethical lines. Marcus Kane, who'd been laying low in his mother's house in Connecticut, suddenly found his voice again. He gave an interview to CNBC, his face a mask of wounded righteousness. I always wondered how Sarah and Julian moved so fast, how they knew exactly where to strike. Now we know they were committing fraud. They manipulated the market, destroyed my company illegally, and now they're finally being held accountable. Sarah watched the interview in her office. Her fists clenched so hard her nails drew blood from her palms. Julian turned off the television. Don't give him the satisfaction of a response. He's desperate, trying to rewrite history now that he's lost everything. Her voice was tight. He hasn't lost everything. He still has his freedom. We might not. The investigation dragged on. Rebecca Torres, now Phoenix's financial controller, worked around the clock with a team of lawyers to document every transaction, every decision, every communication that proved their actions were aggressive but legal. The paper trail Sarah had insisted on keeping saved them. Every email, every contract, every acquisition was documented with clear business justifications. But the stress was taking its toll. Sarah barely slept. When she did, she dreamed about prison, about losing everything again, about being that woman in the rain, except this time there was no door to knock on. Julian found her in the library one night at 3 a.m., surrounded by legal briefs, her eyes red from crying or reading or both. He sat beside her. "Come to bed. You can't solve this tonight." Her voice cracked. "What if we lose? What if Victor manages to destroy us the way we destroyed Marcus? What if I go to prison for the crime of refusing to stay destroyed?" Julian pulled her close. "Then we fight. We appeal. We use every resource we have. But Sarah, listen to me, even if the worst happens. Even if they take Phoenix. Even if they take everything, they can't take who you are. You're not defined by this company. You're defined by what you built from nothing twice." She buried her face in his shoulder. "I'm so tired of fighting. I'm tired of proving myself over and over. When does it end?" His answer was honest. "Maybe never. Maybe that's the price of refusing to be invisible. But you're not fighting alone this time." The break came from an unexpected source. Victor Ashford forced out a vortex and, facing his own legal troubles, made a mistake. He bragged to a former colleague, one who was cooperating with federal investigators on an unrelated matter, about how he'd orchestrated the anonymous tip against Phoenix, how he'd fed the FBI false information mixed with truth to make it seem credible. The colleague recorded the conversation. The recording made its way to Phoenix's legal team. Within 48 hours, the FBI's case began to collapse. The SEC investigation stalled. The U.S. Attorney's Office quietly declined to prosecute, citing insufficient evidence of criminal intent. Sarah was in a deposition when she got the news. Her lawyer's text was simple. "It's over. They're dropping everything. Victor just destroyed himself." She excused herself, walked into the hallway, and called Julian. Her voice shook. "We won. It's over. They're dropping all charges." His relief was palpable even through the phone. "Come home. We're celebrating." But Sarah had one more thing to do first. She called a press conference for that afternoon, standing in front of Phoenix's headquarters with the Manhattan skyline behind her. Her statement was brief. "For the past 3 months, Phoenix Holdings has been under investigation for securities fraud and market manipulation. Today, those investigations have been closed without charges. We were exonerated because we did nothing wrong. Our acquisition of Streamline Logistics was aggressive, yes. It was strategic and calculated and designed to win, but it was legal." She looked directly into the cameras. "I want to be clear about something. I will not apologize for being good at business. I will not apologize for using the same tactics men have used for decades to build empires. I will not apologize for refusing to stay in the box someone else built for me. If that makes me threatening, if that makes me dangerous, then I suggest you get used to being threatened, because I'm not going anywhere, and neither are the women I'm helping build their own empires. The question from the press was inevitable. Do you have any comment on Victor Ashford's alleged involvement in the false allegations? Sarah's smile was cold. Mr. Ashford spent 5 years telling himself he won when he stole Julian Blackwell's algorithm. He spent the last year learning that winning a battle doesn't mean you've won the war. I have no further comment on someone who's become irrelevant. 1 year after Sarah signed the divorce papers, she stood in the same building where her marriage had ended. But this time, she wasn't signing away her future. She was buying it. The law offices of Sullivan, Pierce, and Moore were hosting the closing on Phoenix's acquisition of the building itself. Sarah was converting the top 3 floors into additional office space for Phoenix's legal department, which had grown substantially in the past year. James Sullivan, the lawyer who'd sneered at her napkin business plan, sat across the table looking significantly less confident. Phoenix was now his firm's largest client. Sarah controlled whether they kept that business. His voice was obsequious in a way that would have been satisfying if it wasn't so pathetic. Ms. Mitchell, if you'll just sign here, the acquisition will be complete. We're honored to have Phoenix as both a client and a landlord. Sarah signed with the same pen she'd used to refuse Marcus's $5,000. The irony wasn't lost on her. Mr. Sullivan, I'll be making some changes to the building, starting with new art in the conference rooms. I'm thinking we'll commission pieces by women artists who were told they weren't good enough. Keep the themes aspirational. She stood up, gathering her papers. Oh, and one more thing. I'm hosting a gala next month to celebrate Phoenix's expansion. You're invited. I believe you know the dress code business formal, the kind where everyone's accomplishments are actually their own. Sullivan's face reddened, but he nodded. What else could he do? She owned his building now. The annual New York Business Gala was always a spectacle, but this year the energy was different. Everyone was waiting for the arrival of the power couple who dominated headlines for 12 months straight. Phoenix Logistics. The name had been officially changed 6 months ago, had revolutionized the shipping industry. The open-source Blackwell protocol had forced every major player to innovate or die. Vortex had chosen to die slowly, hemorrhaging market share quarter after quarter. Phoenix had led the charge into the new era, combining Julian's technology with Sarah's logistics genius to create something neither could have built alone. A sleek black limousine pulled up to the red carpet. The door opened. Sarah stepped out first. She wore a gown of liquid gold that caught every light and held it shimmering like she was made of sunlight. Her hair was swept up, showing the graceful line of her neck and the diamond necklace Julian had given her for their first anniversary, not because she needed it, but because he wanted to. She looked nothing like the woman who'd been discarded 14 months ago. She looked expensive, powerful, untouchable. She looked like exactly who she was, a titan of industry who'd built her empire from ruins. Julian followed, looking healthy and vibrant in a way that shocked people who remembered the reclusive ghost. He'd gained weight, filled out, traded the haunted look for something that resembled contentment. He looked at Sarah the way Romeo looked at Juliet, the way Orpheus looked at Eurydice, the way any man lucky enough to have found his equal looked at the woman who'd saved him. They walked the carpet hand in hand, stopping for photos. Reporters shouted questions about Phoenix's next quarter, about expansion plans, about rumors of a new AI project Julian was developing. One reporter's voice cut through. Ms. Mitchell, Phoenix just announced acquisition of Vortex Corporation's remaining assets this morning. Any comment? Sarah's smile was genuine. We're excited to give Vortex's technology a second life. Sometimes things need to be rebuilt from scratch to reach their potential. We're turning their former headquarters into a training center, the second location of our women's program. We believe in second chances, second acts, and the power of rebuilding. As they moved toward the entrance, a man pushed through the velvet rope security, moving to intercept, but not quite fast enough. Marcus Kane stood there looking haggard. His suit was wrinkled off the rack. nothing like the expensive Italian wool he used to favor. His hair was thinning, his face showing the wear of 14 months of consequences. His voice was desperate, loud enough to turn heads. "Sarah, please, I need a minute, just 1 minute. I have a business proposal. I know the Asian markets better than anyone. I can help you expand. I can be valuable." Sarah stopped. She looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time since she'd destroyed him. She didn't feel anger. She didn't feel hate. She didn't feel the burning need for revenge that had driven her into Julian's library that first night. She felt nothing. He was just a stranger with a bad pitch, someone who'd mistaken her for someone who'd forgotten. Her voice was professional, cool. "I'm sorry, Marcus. We're fully staffed and our hiring standards are quite rigorous regarding integrity. I'm sure you understand." Marcus's desperation curdled into anger, the mask slipping. "I made you. You were nothing before me, just a waitress with delusions. You were nobody." Sarah laughed. It was genuine, joyful, the sound of someone who'd stopped caring what their abuser thought. "Marcus, you didn't make me. You just held me back for 10 years. Thank you for finally letting go. Watch me fly." She turned away, taking Julian's arm. They walked up the grand staircase into the ballroom where music played and the future waited. The doors closed behind them, shutting out the cold and the past, and the man who'd thought he could erase her. Inside the ballroom they were greeted like royalty. CEOs who once ignored Sarah now sought her advice. Investors who'd laughed at Julian's retreat now begged for meetings. They'd won not just in the boardroom but in every way that mattered. But the moment Sarah treasured most came later in a quiet corner of the balcony overlooking Manhattan. Julian pulled a small box from his pocket, different from the engagement ring he'd given her. "I had this made for you, for everything you've built." Inside was a simple platinum band engraved with coordinates 40.7614 degrees north, 73.9776 degrees west. The exact location of 1428 Willoughby Street. His voice was soft. "Do you ever think about that night? The rain, the wrong door, the moment everything changed?" She slipped the ring onto her finger beside her wedding band. "Every single day. Best wrong turn I ever made." He kissed her, and the city lights below sparkled like approval. "You knocked on my door when I was lost in darkness. You walked into my life and reminded me that surviving isn't living. You saved me, Sarah." Her response was a whisper against his lips. "We saved each other." 6 months later, Sarah stood in the office that had once been Marcus's, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Her hand rested on her stomach, feeling the gentle curve that was just starting to show. She and Julian had decided to wait to tell people to keep this one thing private in lives that had become very public. Rebecca Torres knocked on the open door. "Boss, the numbers from Q3 are in. We exceeded projections by 18%. The expansion into the Pacific Northwest is performing above expectations." Sarah smiled. "Good. Schedule a bonus distribution for the warehouse staff. They're the ones making it happen." Rebecca hesitated. "There's something else. Marcus Kane was arrested this morning. FBI raid on his mother's house. Apparently he's been running a wire fraud scheme, stealing identities to start shell companies. They think he's been doing it since Phoenix fired him." Sarah felt a twinge of something, not satisfaction exactly, but closure. "I see. Thank you for letting me know." After Rebecca left, Sarah called Julian. His voice was warm. "I heard. Are you okay?" She thought about it, examined her feelings. "I'm fine. He made his choices. I can't save him from consequences, and I wouldn't if I could. He's not my responsibility anymore. He never really was." Julian's relief was audible. "Good. Because I have news too. The new logistics AI passed all beta tests. We're ready to launch in Q1. This is going to change everything, Sarah. Again." She laughed. "We keep changing everything. Maybe someday we'll let the world catch its breath." His response was teasing. "Where's the fun in that?" "Come home. I'm making dinner." Her voice was skeptical. "You're cooking? Should I call the fire department preemptively?" His laugh was warm. "I've been practicing. I can now make exactly one dish without burning it. Come home and be impressed by my mediocrity." Sarah hung up, gathering her things. She looked around the office one last time before leaving for the day. The view was spectacular, the city spreading out in all directions, full of possibility and second chances, and doors waiting to be knocked on. She thought about the woman who'd stood in the rain 14 months ago with nothing but wet clothes and a broken heart. That woman had been brave without knowing it, had refused to accept the ending Marcus had written for her. She'd knocked on a door in a storm, not knowing it would open onto everything she'd lost, and more than she'd ever imagined. She'd built an empire from ruins, had turned betrayal into justice, had transformed pain into power. And the best part? She was just getting started. 2 years after the divorce, Sarah stood on a stage in Chicago at the Global Tech Summit, the same event where she'd first revealed herself to Marcus and the world. But this time she wasn't there for revenge. She was the keynote speaker invited to discuss the future of logistics and the importance of ethical business practices. The audience was packed. Julian sat in the front row with their 6-month-old daughter, Emma, who was miraculously quiet for once. Sarah had named her after the grandmother who'd owned the piano, the grandmother who'd taught Sarah that some things are worth fighting for. Sarah's voice carried across the hall. 2 years ago, I stood at the top of those stairs over there and walked into this room as someone the world saw as a victim making a scene. Today, I stand here as the CEO of the fastest-growing logistics company in North America. The difference isn't luck. It's not revenge, though that was satisfying. The difference is that I stopped letting other people write my story. She paused, letting the words settle. Business schools will teach you about hostile takeovers, about market strategy, about maximizing shareholder value. But here's what they won't teach you. The most important asset in any company isn't technology or capital or market position. It's dignity. It's refusing to participate in systems that devalue human beings. It's building something that makes you proud when you look in the mirror. Her words gained intensity. I could have taken the money Marcus offered. I could have disappeared quietly. I could have accepted his narrative that I was just a startup cost easily replaced and quickly forgotten. But accepting someone else's underestimation of you is the only real failure. Everything else is just data, just setbacks, just information you use to build something better. She looked directly at the camera she knew was streaming this worldwide. To everyone who's been told they're not enough, that they're too old or too young or too something to matter, you're not the problem. The person who couldn't see your value is the problem, and they're about to learn an expensive lesson about what they lost. The audience erupted in applause. Sarah saw women crying, men nodding, young professionals taking notes. Like this was gospel. After the speech, Julian met her backstage with Emma, who'd finally started fussing. He handed her the baby. She's hungry and she only wants mom. But you were incredible up there. World-changing as usual. Sarah cradled Emma, feeling her daughter's warmth. Just trying to make sure she grows up in a world that sees her from day one, that values her before she has to fight for it. Julian kissed her forehead. With you as her mother, that world doesn't stand a chance. They walked out of the convention center together, not through the VIP exit, but through the main doors, moving through the crowd of people who wanted to talk to Sarah, to thank her, to tell her their stories. She listened to each one because she remembered what it felt like to be invisible, to be overlooked, to be discarded. She'd knocked on a door in a storm and found a kingdom. Now she opened doors for others. And that, more than the money, more than the power, more than the revenge, was the victory that mattered. Sometimes the wrong turn is exactly right. Sometimes rock bottom is just the foundation you needed to build something that touches the sky. Sometimes the worst day of your life is just the first page of your best chapter. Sarah Mitchell had learned that lesson in the rain. Now she taught it to anyone who'd listen, opening doors and lighting paths and proving that no one can destroy you without your permission. And she never gave it again.